You are staring at a blank screen. Your English Matura, the high-stakes exit exam, is looming, and your prompt asks for a life-changing experience to impress the graders. So you default to the standard strategy, drilling grammar rules and memorizing stacks of vocabulary flashcards. But cognitive linguists have found that those traditional classroom drills work against your brain's natural wiring. Force-feeding yourself isolated grammar rules often creates high levels of stress, which can actively block your ability to actually use the language. There is a more effective way to approach this. Getting a flat tire in the rain or dropping a piece of toast can actually be the exact material you need to secure a top grade, provided you apply the science of biological input and structural output. High marks on these exams do not require epic survival tales. They require an understanding of how the human mind absorbs foreign words and the specific psychological frameworks used to communicate those words to an audience. This chart compares an average human lifespan to the time required to consciously memorize a language. Traditional instruction takes about 20 minutes of drilling to lock in a single word. Since an average adult vocabulary contains tens of thousands of words, there is simply not enough time to learn this way. Instead, linguists point to the comprehension hypothesis, the idea that we acquire language by understanding messages rather than drilling rules. Your brain uses a mechanism called non-repetitive repetition. In a story, you hear the same target vocabulary repeated over and over as the plot moves forward. The words stay the same, but they appear in new contexts. This anchors the vocabulary to narrative events rather than a boring drill. Narrative immersion also bypasses the affective filter. The affective filter is a term for the emotional variables, like anxiety or boredom, that can act as a wall, preventing language data from reaching the parts of the brain that process it. When you focus on a plot rather than conjugating verbs, your brain drops its defenses. The affective filter lowers, allowing you to absorb English grammar and syntax subconsciously. However, there is a social requirement for this to work. To truly internalize a language, your brain must identify you as a potential member of the group that speaks it. Consider Lula's the chimpanzee. Researchers tried teaching him sign language through direct instruction, but Lula's ignored the human signs. He only acquired the specific signs he saw his fellow chimpanzees using because he viewed himself as a member of their group, not ours. We see this in the animal kingdom too. Young birds will learn the song of a completely different species, but only if they can socially interact with a live bird of that species. Social connection is the primary driver for learning. When you empathize with characters in an English story, you are essentially joining their social club. This emotional investment provides the bridge for your brain to finally accept and acquire the language. Consuming stories provides the input, but for the Matura, you have to generate the output. You have to tell a story of your own. Successful speakers look for learning experiences. These are mundane, everyday moments that hold a larger personal lesson. The challenge is retrieval. Asking a broad question like, "What is my life's biggest adventure?" often causes the brain to freeze under the pressure of the prompt. Instead, use specific sensory prompts. Asking yourself, "What is my favorite childhood smell?" creates a narrow, evocative memory path. Because memory relies on these specific associations, a tiny sensory detail can pull up a wealth of narrative information that a broad question would miss. You can also work backward by starting with a point you believe in. One mother used her habit of explaining sunscreen to her toddler, comparing it to buttering a toasted sandwich, to build an entire presentation on how to communicate complex ideas. A compelling presentation doesn't start with an explosion. It starts by anchoring a personal belief to a highly specific everyday memory. To make that memory exciting for an audience, you need a structure. This is the hero's journey, or the monomyth, the three-act blueprint used in almost every successful story. Act 1 establishes your ordinary life and introduces the call to adventure. This usually involves a mentor, someone who pushes you across the threshold and into a new challenge. Act 2 is the initiation. You face tests and enemies until you reach the inmost cave, the metaphorical term for your greatest challenge. This cave can be as simple as an 8th grade art project where you accidentally ruined your work, or a flat tire where the real enemy was your own pride. The scale of the event matters less than the internal struggle. Act 3 is the return. You survive the ordeal and return to your life with the elixir, the newfound wisdom or lesson that you can now share with your audience. Mapping a mundane event onto this ancient structure is what keeps an audience and an examiner invested in what you have to say. The blank screen is no longer a vacuum. You now have a physiological strategy to manage that initial anxiety and a structural blueprint to guide your delivery. Success on the Matura requires two things: immersing yourself in stories to acquire the language, and using the hero's journey to structure your own experiences. But there is a final, practical rule. You must avoid meandering endings. You cannot finish your journey by trailing off and saying, "And yeah, that's basically it." To maintain authority, you must know your exact last line before you even step up to speak. If every struggle is just the inmost cave of your personal hero's journey, what elixir are you currently trying to earn right now?